Hello and welcome to today's episode of Thursday Tech Bites. Today we're going to check out Kasten K10 version 6. And so I need some help. Joining me today is a little bit under the, I don't want to say under the weather, but the good weather got to him. Matt Bator. How you doing today, Matt?
Hey, I'm hanging in there, Rick. Thanks for asking. It's always good to be back.
Yeah, no, we had a great chat with you and Mark Poland a couple weeks ago about a different milestone. But Kasten K10 version 6, big news at VeeamON. So actually I'll start right there, Matt. This was your first, I think this was your first VeeamON in the Kasten realm of things.
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, how did that go from a Kasten product perspective? How did that go for you and some of the others that were there?
It was definitely great to be a part of the show. I was actually very pleasantly surprised at the number of customers and partners that came up to, either myself or any of the other team members that were there that, are familiar with what their organizations are doing with Kubernetes right now or already are involved in those projects and looking to learn more. So I think we went from, one Kasten focus session at VeeamON last year to a keynote demo and I think 5 breakout sessions this year. So I'm looking forward to doing 25 sessions at the next VeeamON. You can sign me up for that.
Oh, I don't know about 25. That might be a stretch.
It's a 5x multiplier year to year.
Well, I want to live in a world of disciplined growth, so we'll see about that. But it was key news for the week, and to kind of replay where we were 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I was on holiday last week. Apologize for all this for all of you who have seen me before. This will be gone next week, I promise. But that was also concurrent during the Red Hat Summit, which is also a pretty big event in this ecosystem as well. So we kind of co-launched it really at both of those events. We had some of our team was that in Boston, I think. I think we had some of our team there. Yeah. All right. So, first of all, thanks for joining everyone. Let us know in the chat, what your comments are about K10 or what kind of questions you have. We got some great resources here momentarily that we will share with you. But let's take a look at the 3 use cases, Matt, when we talk about Kasten and Kubernetes, Kasten K10, which is actually kind of a trick because we're talking about version 6 and we're talking about the product K10. Don't let the numbers get you all confused. But Matt, walk us through the 3 use cases. And it really, as long as I've been following K10, these have really stayed consistent through the journey.
Yeah. So just, for those of you that are joining us and maybe don't have a background in Kasten or just, Kubernetes data protection in general, right? All of this is driven by the same kind of why, which is, we're seeing a significant increase in the adoption of stateful workloads, things like databases, your Postgres, MySQL, MongoDB, et cetera, running on Kubernetes, in addition to, sort of all of the other application microservices that are making up these cloud native apps. And obviously, Rick, I don't need to tell you that databases are workloads that require protection, right? Any type of persistent data we're putting on that cluster is going to need to be backed up. But ultimately, protecting Kubernetes workloads is a very different ballgame to, say, VMs running in the public cloud or your sort of the hypervisor-focused VM backup that Veeam has been so well known for over 10 years now. Backup for Kubernetes really requires something that again can talk directly to the cluster, understand what a Kubernetes application is. So it's really just a collection of different manifests or what we call application metadata. And then there's now that persistent data component to it as well. So I need to be able to talk to the cluster, extract that application, package it up in a way where it could be restored in place on that cluster. Another, sort of use case here would be cloning for things like dev test use cases. but then also to be able to restore that anywhere. So in the event of a disaster with my primary cluster, how do I restore that to maybe it's another cluster in my data center? Maybe I'm leveraging, a managed Kubernetes service have become incredibly popular from a growth perspective this year. So maybe I'm leveraging something like Amazon EKS or Azure AKS, et cetera, and I want to do DR to one of those cloud hosted environments. Or simply, I want to achieve some other kind of migration. Containerization has been critical to solving kind of the well, it works on my machine problem, but it's still, at a Kubernetes or a container orchestration level, moving an entire application, especially when we're talking about, again, something like where I've got now multiple databases associated with my app. How do I migrate that between different AZs within a public cloud or between different public clouds, or I want to pull that application back on premises, migrate between different distributions. These are all the kind of, applications that we see for what we call app mobility, and leveraging a data protection tool like Kasten to be able to achieve that. So that's the gist of what we do.
Yeah, and I look at this broad story, these three kind of use cases. And, for those of you watching, and, everyone's on their own journey with containerized apps, the different levels. I'll tell everyone that when the time comes that, if you have a Kubernetes-based application, the K10 product is truly very robust and ready for basically anything. But let me tell you a story, Matt. I've been at Veeam nearly 13 years, right? So quite a long time. I've seen a lot of changes, right? It was just that virtual machine backup story, and then physical, NAS, cloud, SaaS, Kubernetes, these types of backups. But I remember I was at the Amazon event a few years ago, AWS reInvent, and a number of people that I used to work with in my previous role when I was assistant administrator, right? I had this I don't think I can say this on live streams, but let's just say a highly fiddlesome application, those ones that nobody likes, right? Everyone has those in their experience. But when I was a sysadmin, we had this crazy app. But my colleagues were at the AWS reInvent event, and I said, hey, I just want to check in with you. I'm not in quote unquote sales. I just want to talk to you. And they told me about this fiddlesome application, and it was an internal homegrown app, 3-letter acronym. It's got 3 different letters, but it was specific for the line of business. And they're still using it, but they're porting it into a containerized app in EKS, right? So I literally had one of those, bane of my existence applications. They ported it to a containerized platform. And I think that's brilliant because it kind of still adhered to the same specs, but they were much more easily able to deploy new versions and respond to changes in the business and stuff like that. So a lot of different orgs can go through their own example. And I personally found it fascinating that they went through that with an app that I used to support on, just regular virtual platforms and, databases and app ends and then client connections and stuff. And they modernized it, but there's still this need for backup and recovery, disaster recovery, application mobility. I think, when people get their head around these, they're not quite, well, they're called use cases, but I want to call them primitives. It's a backup, it's a recovery, it's everything broke, let's take it over here. It's this is born here, let's take it over there and move the platform. You get your head around these primitives of motion, it's super powerful. And it's just really awesome. There's a lot of shared ideology across the Veeam product set and what absolutely. What the K10 product does. So this is really a cool way to kind of visualize the use cases.
Yeah, and it's I think a lot of it's easy for people that have been used to administrating or developing or supporting applications a very specific way for the last 10 plus years to think like, okay, what is this cloud native thing that's coming to disrupt the way I approach infrastructure, operations, anything else? But it's not. one of our other colleagues, Michael Cade, says this all the time. It's not virtualization or Kubernetes, or not virtualization or cloud native. It's always going to be a case of both, and it's about having the right kind of tools that again match the need for that app. So as you mentioned, like that organization was pursuing this just within a specific line of business because they do see the value in transforming that application. But yeah, as soon as you do, you need a solution that again is purpose built for that particular infrastructure. In this case, Kasten is Veeam for Kubernetes. It's that simple.
Oh, it just makes me glow orange about Veeam for Kubernetes. I love that it's become I guess, is that an adverb? I don't know, but it's become a word, and it's truly awesome. Love that. Now, walk me through, Matt, what are some of the highlights of what's new in version 6?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit to unpack here. We probably won't get, certainly through all of this today, but I'll give you some themes, and then I'll share some of my favorites with you, right? So if we look kind of across the top here, we see sort of the three key themes associated with this release. Improvements regarding ransomware protection, improvements regarding scalability and efficiency, and then what we call cloud native integrations, what I would call like ecosystem enhancements, right? And I think this is pretty typical of each major Kasten release, is that we see enhancements in these specific areas. I get teased quite a bit because I always liken this to Daft Punk's harder, better, faster, stronger are my general themes for a Kasten release, and that's again why probably marketing doesn't return all of my emails, and that's fine. But the idea here being, release over release, we're focused on how do we improve security, not just within, but around the product. How do we make things, from an enterprise perspective, scalable and just easier to use? That's what I'll focus mostly on today. And then ecosystem, Kasten itself, our commitment to partner ecosystem, I think has been very critical to our success so far, in that Kubernetes as a whole, has been as successful as it is because it's a very open, customizable platform, right? It allows developers, it allows organizations to build customizations on top of that core platform, and that's what's seen a great deal of adoption, both in terms of different distributions of Kubernetes. We see a lot of, again, now different storage partners wanting to integrate their primary block and file storage with Kubernetes, and also, specifically to us, being able to validate partners that we would use to export backup data as well. So those are, on the integrations piece, that is always a constantly churning machine of just validating new versions of Kubernetes and OpenShift and other storage offerings, other opportunities to integrate with the larger platform. And that's again one of the key kind of benefits that Kasten has of being what we would call a Kubernetes native solution. Not just in that it talks to the Kubernetes API server, but that Kasten itself is a Kubernetes application. So we're just built on a collection of Kubernetes custom resources, and it just makes doing things like automation, like integration with other tools, that much easier.
What I like about that, Matt, sorry about that. What I like about that is that when you break down those cloud native integrations, that really hits on something super important to a broader Veeam strategy. And I've always said here at Veeam that partnerships are in Veeam's DNA. And that's super relevant right here too. Red Hat, Amazon RDS, Google, Anthos, Tanzu from VMware, in fact we did a separate live stream last time we were on. We had Mark, we talked about this. NetApp and Dell, they don't get along with each other, but we want to get along with them individually. This is just great, right? I think that we take that partnership really seriously. And then if you look on the other side, and by the way, I'm just having fun here because
having fun with Zoom It.
Yeah, Matt was super impressed with my Zoom It skills at VeeamON, so I'm bringing it back for him. But we'll talk a little bit about that ransomware protection, and this is just what's new. I think it might be good to kind of iterate what is already there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Matt?
Yeah, so a big part of what's already in place today, sort of the cornerstone functionality here would be support for immutable exports, right? So in the same way that in VBR12, I know we've added support for many different immutable backup targets. Same thing within K10, right? We know that local snapshots on the cluster, that's not a backup. Local snapshots are never a backup. So it's all about getting that data off of the cluster. And in this particular case, we're able to get that, move those backups to a number of different immutable repositories, primarily, Amazon S3 or other S3 compatible object stores that support object locking capabilities. But one of the fun things that just got added here with 6.0 and also is on that integrations front is what I have listed there is policy presets enforcement with Kyverno. So for those not, Kyverno is a policy as code enforcement platform specifically for Kubernetes. So there are other policy as code solutions, like Open Policy Agent is also very common in this space. But what we're demonstrating with that specific integration is basically taking advantage of, again, Kasten being a Kubernetes native solution. So it's built on these different custom Kubernetes APIs, and from a ransomware protection or just data protection perspective in general, we can ensure that, as new applications are created on the cluster, so as we're creating new namespaces, that it's going to force you, we call these guardrails, right? It forces you to make an explicit decision about how am I going to protect this new workload. So it prevents things like developers or other administrators from dropping workloads onto that cluster that might otherwise go unprotected. And what this can actually do for us is then say, hey, for this new namespace that's been created, this particular example leverages labels on an application namespace that would correspond to essentially an SLA within Kasten, or what we call a policy preset. So letting my data protection administrators that are familiar with what my org needs in terms of retention for maybe compliance purposes, they can build out these SLAs. We'll use the classic example of like gold, silver, bronze. And then, when you're creating these new application namespaces, a developer without, again, experiencing kind of any operations friction can just tag that namespace with a specific SLA. And then Kasten will actually automatically create the policy, if it doesn't already exist, according to the specifications within that preset. So again, the idea here is guardrails, and how do we leverage the fact that, again, Kasten is Kubernetes native to automate some of these operational tasks. So I know from a compliance perspective, my applications are protected, whether they were things that were manually protected by an administrator, or it was, an application namespace that showed up 2 minutes ago, which is a great feeling to have, I think.
Well, that's super important if you ask me, Matt, because I'm convinced that the problems that have plagued backup for as long as it's been in existence are things like, well, I can't recover what I haven't backed up. Well, there are some magical things today that can help with that, but that's falling quickly into the category of luck. But I really like that idea of a policy preset with Caverno there, enforcement, because it can really cut that off right at the start. And help me clarify, is that per cluster, or is it just the application namespace itself, or is it super
No,
broad reaching?
that could be at a cluster, at a cluster wide level. And again, because all those policies are then maintained as infrastructure as code, makes it very easy to consistently, roll out those types of policies to multiple different clusters.
Love it.
So you hit on one of my favorite kind of phrases here, which was like, sometimes you feel like you have to get lucky for a restore to work, which is a terrible way for any data protection specialist engineer to feel ever, right? Like right. No one should ever feel like they have to cross their fingers as a part of a restore operation. And one of the topics I talk about here all the time is around data consistency. So crash consistency is good enough for a lot of things. It's not good enough for databases. It's never been good enough for databases. But it might work, right? I could take a crash consistent storage snapshot of, say, like a MongoDB database, and like, I don't know, 90, 97, 98 times out of 100, it will probably restore fine. It's those 1, 2, 3 times that I might really care about that restoring that maybe it didn't work that time. And that's a big part of what we call blueprints within Kasten. So this is basically like this blank canvas for you to be able to describe the data consistency requirements, like basically how to quiesce a given workload. And this is something that again needs to be done at a very data service level within Kubernetes. So what you might do to quiesce Postgres is going to be different from MySQL, as an example. And it's not uncommon for Kubernetes apps to have, maybe multiple different data services within that app. But then if I've got several applications in my cluster, I've probably got some shared data services across them, right? I get really good at one way of deploying and managing Postgres on Kubernetes. I'm going to use that one method across all of my applications. Those are going to share a lot of common traits, what we call, you can see in the middle column there, an application fingerprint. And today, well, I guess prior to 6.0, blueprints have been a very powerful part of the product for ensuring that I can get that data consistency, but it would need to be applied, that blueprint would need to be manually applied to each workload that required it. What application fingerprinting allows us to do is it basically just introduces a new custom resource on the cluster that you can then basically define a policy for. Hey, these are all of my my Postgres resources across multiple applications, across multiple namespaces, that all correspond to these specific settings, and they all use this one blueprint to ensure I get data consistency in my backup. So with this one application fingerprint resource, I can then ensure that, hey, as I'm adding new applications to my cluster, a developer creates a new app namespace. Not only can I leverage, my Caverno guardrails to make sure I've got a policy for it, I can also use my application fingerprints to ensure that backup is going to be a data consistent backup. So in terms of just like, again, scalability for being as hands off with the platform as possible and letting it make the decisions to do the right things, this is a huge new capability.
Oh, that's great. You're like solving all of back's problems all in one fell swoop here with this release. I mean, I think that the consistency topic comes up a lot. Take crash consistency. A lot of people gravitate to the word consistent, but they got to remember the first word is crash. So it's not necessarily a good thing. The other bad one is eventual consistency, which we'll not talk about today. All right, so let's take a look here as we try to we're almost here wrapping up. I want to highlight a cool blog that Gaurav did real quick, and I'm going to jump off. And before I show that, We mentioned the Kyverno policy enforcement, but Matt, you yourself even contributed on GitHub this policy of gold, silver, bronze that you mentioned, right? So we can find this project Kyverno publicly.
Yeah, so that's
on GitHub right there.
So if you're using Kyverno today, their policies community repository, it's got, example policies for a number of different products and solutions, and you can find Kasten folder in there with several different example guardrails that you can very easily implement that way.
Outstanding. So check that out. Also, at the Veeam blog around VeeamON, because like I said, it was news, Gaurav's blog, where he talked about really the written form of a lot of the things we spoke about, which is really cool. Highly recommend you check it out because I really feel like there's something for everyone. I'm going to jump to the one that's near and dear to my heart, instant recovery, which is, a Veeam kind of namesake capability. You can just watch it go here, 5-minute video. You can just see how that looks. And in the course of that, you're actually also seeing the integration with Veeam backup and replication, which is also part of the release. And I'm sorry about the blur. I think there's something else going on with this particular computer. Of course, now it wants to work. But basically here we can see that, you can see an instant recovery of a MySQL Kubernetes-based application. So you just quick views of it. So I think Gaurav's blog really goes through the fingerprinting as well. So, and the consistency that you're talking about. So you can see this in action. Highly recommend that you check that out.
There's a lot of good demos in there associated with some of these bigger features. I'll definitely give another shout out to the transform sets. I know that was one we didn't get a chance to chat about today, but transforms is again, as you're thinking about some of these use cases like disaster recovery, like application mobility, this is the ability to make changes to your metadata as part of the restore. It is a necessary feature to enable those types of use cases, and transform sets just takes that to a whole nother level with just letting you actually build a library for all of your various different transforms that you might develop as a team or share across teams. So another one worth looking at there, but there's plenty of gold in that blog.
Oh, absolutely. I could see that taking huge amount of impact here. Oh no, where did it go? I thought I had a view of a last slide here. I'm having a screen malfunction. We were supposed to have had one more slide with something to share here, but basically I wanted to just draw everyone's attention, and I apologize. It's not working as I would expect. I'll just go this way real quickly. But one of the cool things that is really consistent to what we do at Veeam is our product strategy, where it's so easy to try our products. And if you want to check it out, this QR code will take you straight away, or just go to the Kasten.io website. Can't miss it at the top. You should be able to start with the free edition, fully featured, by the way, for up to 5 nodes, which is actually still a pretty powerful cluster, if you ask me. And it even works in the public cloud deployments of Kubernetes. And any comment you want to add about that, Matt?
It's protecting my home lab right now, the same way that Veeam Community Edition was protecting my home lab 12, sure. 13, 14 plus years ago. Yeah.
Well, you got one of the cool home labs that are Kubernetes now. Yeah. So
again, it's not Kubernetes or virtualization. It's an and. So it's
fair shout. Awesome. Well, hey, there's so much in V6, and I really enjoyed this quick chat here where we checked out Kasten K10 V6. Matt, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rick. I'll give my very as much as I can give a wave there. Oh.
Yeah, no, I get it. I appreciate Matt's a cyclist, and I like to get on the bike as well. We actually both took a fall, but mine wasn't nearly as bad. Long story, decided to land head first, and that was a good idea. Find me somewhere, I'll tell you the story. But also a big shout to our producers, Mark, and the social media team as well, that helped bring this content to you here. Could not do it without you. I have another Tech Bites scheduled for July. We got a busy year or a busy month, a busy summer. But with the next one coming up in July, we'll get that one promoted later around another storage platform partner of Veeam's. But on behalf of Matt and the social media team and our product teams, want to thank you all for joining today. That concludes our stream.